Since I'm discussing my favorite mystery author of all times, the Queen of Mystery, Agatha Christie, I thought it was apropos that I wear sort of a crown. Hi Booktube, I'm Marilyn, Maya, and welcome back to my channel. I wanted to welcome a few of the new subscribers who have been new to my channel. Welcome, I appreciate all of you, and for those who are coming back, welcome too. During this 18 months that I've been on Booktube, I've been reading a lot of Agatha Christie. And even though I've read most of the books when I was in my 20s and 30s, not all, I found out, but most of them, it's been a real pleasure to get into her again. And I have some books that I want to show you that I've read over the 18 months, with a few that are missing that I'll explain later. I'm not going to do any spoilers, and I'm going to show you them in publication date, though I've never read, I don't think, any books by publication date. But I thought it would be interesting to show them to you in publication date. And I'm not going to give any spoilers, so let's, without further ado, as the booktubers say. The first one is Peril at End House. And this book was written in 1932. And what it says in the back was interesting, even though I have my own thoughts about it. It says, the incomparable Hercule Poirot faced a most unusual challenge, preventing murder. Miss Nick Buckley, the vivacious but impoverished owner of End House, dismissed as accidents her several brushes with violent death. But the dogged little Belgian discerned behind them the deadly hand of design. Unless he discovered the motive, a bold and faceless killer would succeed, and that the great Hercule Poirot could not allow. I sort of like that little blurb, and I talked about this a little bit in that this pits the older and younger generation, and I thought that was sweet, being that it's 1932 and still there's this generation gap going on. So Peril at End House features Christie's private detective, Poirot, as well as Arthur Hastings and Chief Inspector Japp, and is the 6th novel featuring Poirot. So Poirot and Hastings are vacationing in Cornwall, meeting young Magda Buckley and her friends. He is persuaded, with good reason by the way, that someone is out to kill her, and she doesn't believe it. And I thought that was kind of cute. They meet all of her friends in her home called End House. Though he aims to protect Nick, a murder happens that provokes Poirot to mount a serious investigation. I just heard that Lil from Lil's Vintage World really liked this book, and I can see why. The younger and the older generation, coming together and, is fun, as well as, the young people in this book. But also something else that struck me about this book is that one of the accidents that the young girl goes through is that she's laying in bed and a picture is on the wall, and the picture falls and misses her. Well, I had the same accident, and luckily my picture hit me but was very light, so it didn't hurt me much. But that made me think I better not put any heavy pictures right above my head. So I related to that. So that was a really good book. I like Peril at End House. So next in publication date is a book that I hadn't read before, and it's Dumb Witness, featuring a fox terrier. And it's Bob the dog has a pivotal role in this book. And some of it is in Bob's POV, which was very cute. everyone did I say cute too many times? Sorry about that. Everyone blames Emily Arundel's fox terrier leaving a ball on the stairs. So someone's out to kill her, let's put it that way. And the Hercule Poirot, the Belgian detective, is the last book to feature the character of Hastings until the final Poirot novel, 1975's Curtain, Poirot's last case, which Arthur Hastings also narrates. And so this book is also narrated, like I said, in Arthur Hastings' voice. And I really enjoyed this book. I had never read it, and it's pretty ingenuous book, as all of Agatha Christie's books are. So I say it was written in 1937. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about this book, except that there's a lot of twists and turns as usual, and a very good ending. Well, the third book everyone pretty much knows, and then there were none. 1939 Standalone. What's interesting is Agatha Christie says it was her most difficult book to write, and you can understand why. My cover fell off, but I'm very partial to this cover because not only does it have something to do with the book, but it's a pulp fiction cover. And I like the pulp fiction covers because they prettied up a lot of the newer, the newer covers, and some of them I don't care for. So all of these books are mine, by the way. They're not library books, and a lot of them I bought used, like this one, and I was looking for this particular copy. All right, so we all know this was written in 1939. It's a standalone. Put it down, and 8 people arrive on an island. It's an isolated island off the Devon, or if anybody knows how to pronounce it. There's a lot of English people out there, or British people. So each has received a personal invitation to go to this island. They are met by a butler and a cook housekeeper, Thomas and Ethel Rogers, who explain that their hosts, Ulick, Norman Owen, and Una Nancy Owen, have not yet arrived, although they have left instructions. This is a scary book, and the first time I read it, it really scared me, and I was scared to read it again. Didn't scare me as much the second time, but it's one of her most famous books. I think it's the most well-read, the most read book of all her books, and with good reason. The plot was not only creative, it might have been original, and a lot of people have copied this theme. Okay, so I won't talk much about that, except I said, please read it. Don't read it first. I wouldn't suggest you read this book first, but read it. So the next publication date is 1940. The next year. It seems like she was very prolific. She wrote a book every year, and it's Sad Cypress. And I never read this book. Again, Lil from Lil's Vintage World got me turned on to this book, and I loved it. It's a romance. There's a lot going on. And what did I write? So Ellen, it's a Poirot book also. In fact, most of the books that I've read are either, except for one exception, are standalones or Poirot books. I have one Miss Marple, but I plan to read much more of Miss Marple in the coming year. Well, Eleanor Carlyle and Roddy Wellman are engaged to be married, and they know each other since childhood. And then she receives an anonymous letter claiming that someone is sucking up to their wealthy aunt, Laura Wellman, from whom Eleanor and Roddy expect to inherit a sizable fortune. So they go there, and so much ensues. I should tell you a little more. I don't even know if I should tell you this, because I think this is sort of a spoiler. But Hercule Poirot is called in, and even he is stumped for a time. That's all I'll say about this, except that it has a lot of romance in it. And I like that. I like the way that the story unfolded. So this is one of my favorites of last year. And the next publication date is The Five Little Pigs. I did read this one, 1942, and it's about the Peril family. And so there's 5 people, 5 little pigs. If you know the first little piggy went to the market, the second little piggy stayed home, the third little piggy had roast beef, the fourth little piggy had none, and the 5th little piggy cried wee, wee, wee all the way home. My mother told me that rhyme when I was a child, and the way she ties things up with each of the little pigs, the 5 people, was ingenious. Anyway, so he's investigating 5 people about a murder that was committed 16 years ago. So Carolyn Crail, who was convicted, she died in prison. She wasn't hanged, but she died in prison. And after being wrongfully accused of murdering her husband, Amias Crail, by poisoning him. In her final letter to her daughter, she claims to be innocent of the murder, and her daughter goes to Peril. Her name was Carla Lamarchant, to investigate this cold case based on the memories of the people closest to the couple. So what's so fascinating about the 5 little pigs is that each of them was told to write an account of what happened during that time. And so we get the point of views of all the 5 people. And until the end, we have no idea who did it. But he ties it up perfectly, or I should say Agatha Christie ties this up perfectly. So it's one of my favorites from last year also. All right, so the next book I never read, and it's 1948, Taken at the Flood. And what's unusual about this book is that it was published first in the US before the United Kingdom. And it tells a story. It had a different name. It was, what was the name of it? Taken at the Flood. Now, I read this with Janelle at Too Fond of Books. We had a great time. There Was a Tide. That was the name of the English title. The British title, I should say. And then it was Taken at the Flood was the American title, or vice versa. Anyway, this is an interesting book. It's very different. It wasn't as warmly received, but it's unique and unusual in that it takes place, and it's about the war. And Agatha Christie didn't write much about, this is post-war. And though she wrote it in 1948, it's set in 1946. And it tells a story, like I said, of post-war World II England, where life seems upside down. Now, what I mean by upside down, or what she meant by upside down, is that the people who stayed home and the people that went away to fight the war had different experiences. And in some ways, the people who stayed home had to be more adventurous and had to live, by the seat of their pants more than the people who, one of the main characters was a wren, and she went away to fight the war. So what is this about? Okay, so one family in a village not pretty close to London, and Eleanor Carlyle comes back from being a wren and to her farmer engaged. She's engaged to a farmer who owns a lot of property, and they have different experiences, and they're, and in this mix, there's economic problems because of post-war, and this leads to murder, let's put it that way, and also romance. And what else did I say? Okay, so there's a new person introduced in this. It's Detective Spence, whom Poirot works again in a few more stories. And it's about the Claude family, brother and one sister. I'm not going to really tell you, but they lost one of the brothers in the Blitz, in a London raid, and the young widow and her brother come to the town and meet all these people. And the young widow is the one who inherits all the money. So there's a lot of trouble within this family of how they're going to relate to this young widow and her brother. And also there's a lot of romance. So I quite enjoyed it. It didn't have, it wasn't as warmly received, but I thought it was great. Okay, getting on to now we're missing all the 50s and the early 60s. And there's I'm sure there are a lot of good books that were written there. Maybe Death on the Nile and all of the famous books were written around that time, or maybe not. But I will find out, because I intend to collect all of Agatha Christie. So the next one is a Marple, and it's a Caribbean mystery. And I talked about this a lot, so I won't go into it very much, except to say that this was very warmly received. And it said that Agatha Christie is back to putting out very exciting books. And I thought it was exciting. So Agatha Christie, instead of, it's a Miss Marple book, not Agatha Christie. Miss Marple goes on vacation. She had pneumonia, and her nephew Raymond sends her to Saint Honoré, which is based on Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago. And a lot happens there. So what is it about? It's taking place at the Golden Palm. So right in the beginning, she speaks with a Major Palgrave, a well-traveled man with a lot of stories to tell. And a lot of the stories are very boring stories, so she's half listening while sitting in her deck chair. And he shows her a picture of a murderer. But after he looks he looks in his wallet, he changes the subject, and he looks up to see why. And she looks up to see why he stopped, and she sees several people. And he ends up being murdered. What's special about this book is the way the people on the island are portrayed. The people that are investigating the murder are African Caribbeans, and that's different for her. And there are a lot of Black characters, which I really appreciated. And I talked about Agatha Christie's, being, there was a lot of racism in her earlier books. And as another, a person on, if you read Medium, there was an article that I referred to when I first talked about this book that said, when she knew better, she did better. And this was written by an African-American woman who loves Agatha Christie. So, this book was very exciting because of a couple of reasons. And one reason is that she's more active, because she doesn't have her, the gossipy neighbors, and she's a fish out of water. And she meets people, but she has to be more active and go and search them out. And there's a lot of interesting characters. And now one of them is Mr. Raphael. And I was just reading that he figures in another mystery. I think it was Curtain, which is the last of the Peril novels. So, but anyway, I loved this book. Some people don't love it as much, but I loved it because Agatha Christie was really, she was in her mood of reading poetry and quoting Shakespeare and running around the place and talking to strangers, well, you know, the way you do when you're on vacation usually. And Jane Marple, which I keep on saying Agatha Christie, well, she's the inventor of Jane Marple. Jane Marple is doing all these things. Okay, so that's all I'll say about it. And my last book, I promise it's the last book, I just finished reading with Brian at Bookish, and I'm happy to say that he was blown away by this book too. At least, you know, not as much as I was maybe, but he really enjoyed this book, and it's Endless Night by, of course, by Agatha Christie. And this is also a Pulp Fiction cover where there's a dead owl with a knife and a note that says, "Go away, get out of here." And Sunday Times said it's one of the best things Agatha Christie has ever done. So Michael Rogers dreamed of a perfectly designed house and a rich, beautiful wife. He found the girl and he built the house, but he built it, it had a curse on it. And sudden death had already struck once. So what did I write about it? First of all, this was written in the late 60s, 67, where I was 17. So I really related to the sort of hippie vibe it had. So William Blake, who was a poet, in Auguries of Innocence, inspired Agatha Christie for the title. And it says, "Every night and every morn, some to misery are born. Every morn and every night, some are born to sweet delight. Some are born to sweet delight, some are born to endless night." And this poem is repeated over and over in this book in different places. It's also, and this was the hippie vibe to me, his wife, Ellie, in one part of the book, she's playing the guitar and she sings this song. She has music to this song. And it had a hippie vibe to it, which I liked. Not that I was a hippie during 67, but anyway. So the story begins with Michael Rogers. He's also the narrator. He's 22 years old, and he's telling the reader about his time as a chauffeur and how he met the architect, Rudolph Santonix. He plans to one day have a house built by Santonix, at least in his mind. And he's poor, though, and so he can't afford to hire the Santonix, who's, by the way, is ill, very ill. He explains that he's a rolling stone, another kind of, he doesn't actually say rolling stone, I don't think, but it sort of has the hippie vibe to it too. And he isn't content doing just one thing, so and doesn't want to settle down to too many different, so he has many different jobs in his short life. But one day he wants to settle down in his dream house with his dream woman. But for now, he just can't imagine settling down. So this book was just my favorite, I think, of all of the books that I've talked about today. So in these 18 months, I've read quite a few Agatha Christie's. And I'll go over them again, as a booktuber is wont to do. So we have Peril at End House. We have Dumb Witness. We have A Torn and Then There Were None. We have Sad Cypress. We have Five Little Pigs. We have Taken by the Flood. We have A Caribbean Mystery and Endless Night. And I enjoyed all of them in different ways. There wasn't a stinker in them all. I love them all. Some less, some more. And I'm looking forward to reading more of Agatha Christie as the year goes on, because I kind of left out, these are ones that were not as well known, except for And Then There Were None. And some of them were firsts for me. So I had planned to do a lot in March Mystery Madness, but life kind of stepped in, and I had an eye procedure done that turned out great. And I also had, and you can barely see it, but I had a bad burn that needed attention, and I had to go to the doctor for that. And that's cleared up too, very nicely. So I wasn't able to do as much Agatha Christie and other mystery novels that I wanted to read. And so I have a lot to get through in April, which I plan to do. And I have a little haul of some mystery books that I plan to read in April. So March Mystery Madness is going to turn into April Mystery something. April fun, because I plan to read books that I really want to read. Not that I didn't want to read all of these, but I had so many plans to read so many books. Well, you know what they say about plans. Anyway, I'm going to leave you now with all my love and affection for everyone who watches my videos and loves the baby boomer booktuber, or at least likes her. So subscribe to my channel if you're new, and please watch another video that's coming up very soon. So I wish you all a pleasant reading, and aloha from Hawaii.